500 guests and none of them were breathing. Shin Sung-min stood at the altar of the Grand Hyatt Seoul's Cathedral Ballroom, surrounded by cascading white roses and orchids that cost more than most people's yearly salary. The priest's voice echoed through the cavernous space, asking the question every person in this room already knew the answer to. Do you take Han So-ra to be your lawfully wedded wife? And Sung-min felt absolutely nothing. He didn't run. He didn't look back. He simply walked, like a man who'd just made the only real choice of his entire life. But before we continue, smash that subscribe button, drop a diamond if you think Sung-min should disappear forever and start a new life. The priest's voice echoed through the cathedral ballroom like a death sentence wrapped in ceremony. Shin Sung-min, do you take Han So-ra to be your lawfully wedded wife, to have and to hold from this day forward, for as long as you both shall live? Sung-min stood perfectly still, his hand resting lightly on the bride's gloved fingers, the weight of 500 pairs of eyes pressing into his back like physical objects. The white roses surrounding the altar were suffocating, their perfume thick enough to choke on. Crystal chandeliers cast prismatic light across faces he'd known his entire life. Faces that smiled while planning murders. Faces that toasted to peace while sharpening knives. Faces that had watched him grow from a boy who wanted to be a pianist into a man who'd killed 17 people before his 30th birthday. The bride's veil trembled slightly. Beneath the lace, Han So-ra was probably calculating whether his hesitation was tactical or genuine, whether this pause was part of some strategy she hadn't been briefed on. They'd met exactly twice before today. Once at the engagement announcement where they'd shaken hands like business partners. Once at a dinner where they'd discussed weather and wine while their fathers negotiated territory divisions in the next room. She didn't love him. He didn't love her. Love had nothing to do with this. This was a treaty, a merger, a carefully orchestrated end to a decade-long war that had cost both families millions in revenue and dozens of soldiers. His "I do" would mean peace, expansion, consolidated power that would make the Shin-Han alliance untouchable in Seoul's underworld. His "I do" would also mean spending the rest of his life as a figurehead king in a castle built by his father, making decisions approved by a council of elders, producing heirs to continue a legacy he'd never wanted, and dying exactly like his father had, surrounded by wealth and utterly alone. Sung-min looked at the bride, really looked at her for the first time. She was beautiful in the way expensive things were beautiful, flawless, cold, designed for display. Her dress probably cost more than most people's cars. Her makeup was airbrushed perfection. Her posture was impeccable. And behind the veil, he could feel her indifference radiating like winter frost. This was a death sentence, not the kind delivered by bullets or blades, but the slow suffocation of a life lived for everyone except yourself. He'd spent 32 years doing his duty, taking over the syndicate when his father's dementia made him a liability, eliminating threats, building partnerships, maintaining order through controlled violence and calculated mercy. He'd been a good son, a better boss, and a perfect weapon, but he'd never been free. The priest cleared his throat delicately. Mr. Shin? Sung-min's hand slipped from the bride's. He turned slowly, deliberately, like a man who'd just made the only real decision of his entire life. And he walked. The silence that crashed over the ballroom was absolute. No gasps, no whispers, just stunned, suffocating shock as the head of the Shin Syndicate walked away from his own wedding. His footsteps on marble echoed like gunshots. 500 people frozen in their seats, hands instinctively moving toward concealed weapons, minds racing to understand what protocol existed for this exact scenario. Behind him, someone started shouting, his uncle's voice sharp with fury, then his mother's shrill with panic. Then chaos erupting like a flash flood as the Han family realized they'd just been humiliated in front of every major crime family in South Korea. But Sungmin kept walking. Past pews filled with enemies pretending to be allies. Past the 12-foot floral arrangements that had taken a team 3 days to install. Past the guards stationed at the doors who looked at him with confusion instead of stepping aside until he gave them the look that had always meant move or die, and they moved. The ballroom doors swung shut behind him, muffling the eruption of voices. The hallway beyond was supposed to be empty, cleared and secured by his team, a sterile corridor connecting the ceremony to his planned escape route. He'd mapped this out at 3 a.m. when insomnia and desperation had finally crystallized into decision. Service elevator, underground garage, car waiting with keys in the ignition, airport, disappear. But the hallway wasn't empty. Cherry Reeves was on her knees in the middle of the marble floor, surrounded by what used to be an antique serving platter. Shattered porcelain scattered in a 3-foot radius around her, the sound of breaking china still echoing off the walls. Her hands were shaking as she tried to gather the pieces. Her black vest and white shirt, the Grand Hyatt's required uniform for catering staff, somehow still pristine despite the disaster. Her natural hair was pulled back in a practical low bun, a few strands escaping around her face, and she was crying. Not delicate tears, real chest-heaving sobs that she was desperately trying to suppress, one hand pressed over her mouth, like she could physically hold the emotion in. Her whole body was trembling, shoulders hunched defensively like she was trying to make herself smaller, invisible, safe. Sungmin stopped walking. His exit strategy evaporated. Every tactical instinct that had kept him alive in a world where hesitation meant death was screaming at him to keep moving, that he had maybe 90 seconds before security burst through those doors, that this wasn't his problem. But something about her broke through the ice he'd spent years building around himself. She looked utterly devastated over broken dishes in a building where men planned murders over dessert. She looked real in a place where everything was performance. She looked like she still believed consequences mattered, that mistakes had weight, that the world operated on fairness instead of power. She looked up. Their eyes met. Hers were red from crying, wide with shock at seeing him, reflecting the crystal sconce lighting like they held their own illumination. Terror and confusion and something else. Recognition, maybe, or just the universal human instinct to freeze when confronted by a predator. He saw her hand to her mouth, the defensive hunch of her posture, the way she flinched, even though he hadn't moved, and something in his chest cracked. Some wall he'd built brick by brick since childhood when he'd learned that caring about people made you weak, made you vulnerable, made you someone else's weapon. Cherry's mouth opened. Words started forming. Apologies, explanations, desperate pleas, and English-accented panic. But before sound emerged, the ballroom doors exploded open. 6 security guards poured into the hallway, earpieces crackling with overlapping instructions, weapons already drawn, because their boss had just committed the most public act of treason in syndicate history, and they had seconds to contain him before the Han family declared war. They saw Sungmin first, then registered Cherry, and their expression shifted from confusion to lethal suspicion in the space of a heartbeat. Boss, step back. The lead guard, Minjun, 10-year veteran, 3 kills, absolutely loyal, had his gun trained on Cherry like she was a legitimate threat instead of a waitress having the worst day of her life. Hands where we can see them. Now! Cherry's hands shot up, still clutching porcelain shards, blood from a cut on her palm she probably hadn't noticed yet running down her wrist. She started shaking her head frantically, words tumbling out in panicked English. I swear I just dropped. I'm just catering. Please don't. And Sungmin made his second impulsive decision in 5 minutes. He stepped between Cherry and 6 loaded guns, his voice dropping into the register that had ended negotiations and prevented wars, the tone that every person in his organization knew meant this is not a discussion. She's with me. Minjun's gun didn't waver. Boss, we need to... She is with me. Sungmin reached back without looking, found Cherry's wrist, pulled her to her feet with enough force that she stumbled against him. She was tiny compared to his 6-foot frame, the top of her head barely reaching his shoulder. He could feel her whole body shaking, adrenaline and terror and complete incomprehension at what was happening making her practically vibrate. The guards exchanged glances, calculations running behind their eyes. Their boss had just walked out on a wedding that represented 6 months of negotiation and millions in political capital. Now he was claiming ownership of a random hotel employee in a way that made no tactical sense. Either he'd lost his mind, or this was part of some plan they hadn't been briefed on. Sungmin didn't give them time to decide. He dragged Cherry toward the service elevator. His grip firm enough that she couldn't escape, but not painful, just relentlessly purposeful. She made a small sound of protest, her free hand grabbing at his arm, more for balance than resistance. "Sir, we need to secure..." Minjun started. "Tell them I had a breakdown." Sungmin jammed the elevator call button with enough force to crack the plastic. "Tell them I've been unstable. Buy me 20 minutes. Boss, 20 minutes, Minjun. Then you're released from obligation, understood?" The elevator doors opened. Sungmin pulled Cherry inside, her shoes leaving small smears of blood from where she'd cut her knee on the porcelain. The last thing he saw before the doors closed was Minjun's face. Loyal, conflicted, already reaching for his radio to deliver a message that would turn every resource in Seoul toward finding them. The elevator descended. Cherry was pressed against the far wall, breathing hard, her eyes locked on him with an expression somewhere between terror and furious confusion. She'd dropped the porcelain shards somewhere. Her hands were empty now, except for the blood on her palm. "What?" Her voice cracked. She tried again. "What the hell just happened?" Sungmin finally allowed himself to look at her. Really look. At her catering uniform, and her tear-streaked face, and her complete lack of understanding about how catastrophically her life had just changed. She had no idea who he was beyond the groom. No concept of what it meant that 6 armed men had burst in, ready to execute her. No framework for processing why a mafia boss had just claimed her like property and was currently kidnapping her in a service elevator. "I just ruined your life," he said flatly, tonelessly, the same voice he used to deliver execution orders. "And probably saved it. I'm not sure which one yet." "Saved? Ruined? I don't?" Cherry's accent thickened with stress, the American vowels elongating. "I was just working. I dropped a plate. I don't even know who you..." The elevator dinged. Parking level B3. The doors opened onto concrete and fluorescent lights and the smell of gasoline. Sungmin scanned the garage with the automated threat assessment his training had made instinctive. 2 security cameras. His people controlled the feeds. 3 exit routes. 1 black BMW M5, armor-plated, untraceable plates. Keys in the ignition exactly where he'd left them 6 hours ago, when he'd still thought he might actually go through with the wedding. He pulled Cherry toward the car. She was finding her footing now, literally and metaphorically, starting to resist his grip. "Wait, stop, I can't just... My sister needs..." "Your sister needs you alive." Sungmin opened the passenger door, physically guided her inside with a hand on her head like police did with suspects. She was still protesting, still trying to twist away, but he was stronger and desperate and absolutely certain that if he left her here, she'd be dead within an hour as collateral damage. He closed her door, rounded the car, slid behind the wheel. The engine roared to life. Cherry immediately grabbed for the door handle. Child locks engaged. She yanked harder, panic rising in her voice. "Let me out! You can't just— This is kidnapping! I'll scream!" "Scream!" Sungmin put the car in gear, headed for the exit ramp. "No one who hears you will help." They burst out of the garage into Seoul's nighttime chaos. Neon bleeding across wet streets. Traffic thick even at this hour. The city pulsing with light and sound, and millions of people who had no idea that the fragile peace between two crime families had just shattered. Sungmin's phone was vibrating in his pocket, a constant buzzing that meant every lieutenant, every ally, every person whose loyalty was now being tested was trying to reach him. He ignored it. Cherry was still pulling at the door handle, then hitting the window, then finally turning to him with tears streaming down her face again and fury cutting through her fear. "Why are you doing this? I didn't do anything. I don't even know who you are." Shin Sung-min. He took a hard right, cutting across 2 lanes of traffic. A horn blared. Head of the Shin Syndicate, the man who just walked out on a wedding that was supposed to end a 10-year war. Her face went pale, recognition dawning like horror. The Mafia! You're the Mafia! Close enough. And you just— at your own— She couldn't finish the sentence, hands coming up to press against her temples like her head was splitting. Oh God, they're going to think I helped you. They're going to think I'm involved. They already do. Sungmin checked the rearview mirror. 2 sets of headlights that had been behind them for 3 blocks. Could be coincidence. Probably wasn't. That's why you're still breathing. If I'd left you there, they'd have questioned you until you broke, then killed you to tie up loose ends. Cherry made a sound that was half sob, half hysterical laugh. "So you kidnapped me for my own protection." "Yes." "That's insane." "Yes." The traffic light ahead turned red. Sungmin didn't slow down. He gunned through the intersection, tires squealing, other cars swerving with outraged horn blasts. The 2 sets of headlights behind them tried to follow. One made it through. One got blocked by a delivery truck. Cherry braced herself against the dashboard, her voice climbing toward panic. "You're going to get us killed." "They're going to get us killed if I don't lose them." He yanked the wheel left into a narrow alley, the BMW's side mirrors nearly kissing the walls on both sides. Trash bags and recycling bins scraped along the car's armor plating. Behind them, the following vehicle, a black SUV with tinted windows, tried to make the turn and couldn't, tires shrieking as it tried to reverse. Sungmin emerged from the alley into a different district, immediately merged into traffic, like they'd been there all along. He took 3 random turns, doubled back twice, cut through a hotel parking garage and out the other side. No headlights, no pursuit. Just the ambient chaos of Seoul at night absorbing them like they'd never existed. Cherry had gone quiet. When he glanced over, she was staring at her hands, at the blood drying on her palm from the broken china, at the way they were still shaking. She looked like someone in shock. Color drained from her face, breathing shallow. "I can't believe this is happening," she whispered. "I just wanted to make rent." Something in her voice, the flatness, the exhaustion, the complete absence of the survival instinct that should have been screaming, made Sungmin's chest tighten again. She wasn't crying anymore. She'd moved past fear into something worse, resignation. The defeated acceptance of someone who'd been beaten down so many times that disaster felt inevitable. "What's your full name?" he asked, partly to keep her talking, partly because if she was going to be his responsibility, he should know what to call her. "Cherry Reeves?" She laughed bitterly. "My mom loved Motown, named me after the song. Thought it would bring me luck. How's that working out? I'm being kidnapped by the Korean Mafia, so you tell me." Despite everything, the adrenaline, the danger, the enormous complexity he'd just introduced into his escape plan. Sungmin felt his mouth twitch toward something that might have been a smile if he remembered how those worked. She had spirit. Most people confronted with what she'd just experienced would still be screaming or catatonic. She was making jokes. He pulled into a night market in Dongdaemun, the kind of place that stayed open until dawn and was so crowded with vendors and tourists that surveillance was useless. Parked in a corner where the BMW would be one of 30 black sedans. Killed the engine. Cherry looked around at the chaos. Food stalls blazing with heat, vendors shouting prices, teenagers clustered around phone screens, music bleeding from a dozen different sources. Where are we? Hiding in plain sight. Sungmin pulled off his jacket, his tie, rolled up his shirt sleeves, transforming from groom to just another businessman having a late night. He reached into the back seat, grabbed a hoodie he'd stashed there weeks ago when he'd first started planning this, handed it to Cherry. "Put this on. Cover your uniform." She took it automatically, then seemed to remember she was angry. "And then what? We just hang out at a market? They're hunting you. You said so yourself." "They're hunting a man in a tuxedo with a waitress in catering uniform. We're now 2 people getting late-night food." He opened his door. "Come on. What if I run?" He looked at her directly, let her see the truth in his eyes. "You'll be dead by morning. They have your face from security footage, your name from hotel employment records, probably your address by now. You run, you die, you stay with me. You have a chance." Cherry's jaw clenched, fury and helplessness warring across her face, but she pulled on the hoodie. It swallowed her frame, making her look even smaller, and got out of the car when he did. She stood close to him, not because she wanted to, but because the market crowd was pressing in, and he was the only solid thing in her rapidly dissolving reality. They walked through the market like ghosts, Sungmin buying time while his mind raced through contingencies. He bought her a bottle of water from a vendor, watched her drink it with shaking hands, bought himself coffee he didn't want, kept them moving, circulating, blending. After 20 minutes, when he was certain no one had tracked them, he led her back to the car. She didn't argue this time, just climbed in when he opened the door. Her silence more unnerving than her earlier panic. He drove, not randomly this time, but with purpose, headed east toward neighborhoods where the Shin Syndicate's influence thinned, where Han family territory started bleeding in, where the gaps in surveillance created pockets of anonymity. Cherry finally broke her silence as they crossed into a district that looked tired. Older buildings, less flash, the kind of place where people minded their business because they had to. "Where are we going?" "Safe house." Sungmin pulled into an underground parking garage beneath a building that was probably 40 years old, the concrete cracked and stained. "Somewhere I kept for emergencies. No one knows about it. Not my lieutenants, not my family. Just you. Just me. Until now." The apartment was on the 7th floor, accessed by a stairwell that smelled like mildew and someone's cooking. Sungmin unlocked 3 separate deadbolts, pushed open a door that hadn't been opened in 6 months. Inside was exactly as he'd left it, a studio space with 1 window overlooking an alley, minimal furniture, no personal touches, a safe house designed for survival, not living. 1 bed against the far wall, a small kitchen area with a hot plate and mini fridge, a bathroom barely big enough to turn around in, a single blanket folded on the bed, no TV, no decoration, nothing that made it a home. Cherry stepped inside, took in the space with hollow eyes, then turned to face him. "This is it. This is where we're hiding?" "For tonight. And tomorrow? I don't know yet." She laughed, sharp and brittle. "You kidnapped me without a plan. That's fantastic." "That's just perfect." She crossed to the window, looked out at nothing, wrapped her arms around herself. My sister has treatment tomorrow, hospital in Lagos. She needs me to send money. If I don't, her voice cracked. She's 10. She has sickle cell. The treatment keeps her stable. I've never missed a payment. The information hit Sung-min like a physical blow. She wasn't just a random waitress. She was someone's lifeline. A 10-year-old girl in Nigeria was depending on the money Cherry sent from Seoul, and he'd just destroyed her ability to send it. "I'll pay for it," he heard himself say. "The treatment. However much it costs. I'll handle it." Cherry spun around. "Why? Why would you do that?" "Because this is my fault." "You're damn right it's your fault." The anger finally broke through, raw and incandescent. "I didn't ask for any of this. I came to Seoul to work, to make enough money to keep my sister alive, and you just—" She gestured wildly, unable to find words big enough for the catastrophe. "You ruined everything." "I know." "Do you?" She stalked toward him, all 5 feet something of fury in an oversized hoodie. "Do you have any idea what it's like to have everything hanging by a thread? To work 3 jobs and still not have enough? To lie awake terrified that one mistake, one missed paycheck, one piece of bad luck will destroy the only person you have left?" Sung-min didn't answer. Couldn't. Because he didn't know those things. He'd been raised in wealth, built on violence. Had never worried about money or medical care or survival in the way she meant. His fears were different: assassination, betrayal, the slow death of autonomy. But not poverty. Never that. Cherry's anger deflated as quickly as it had risen. She sank onto the edge of the bed, put her face in her hands. "I just want to go home." "You can't." He said it gently, which somehow made it worse. "Not yet. I'm sorry." "Stop apologizing." Her voice was muffled. "It doesn't change anything." Sung-min looked at her, this woman he'd known for less than an hour, whose life he'd derailed completely, who was owed explanations he didn't know how to give. He crossed to the small kitchen area, opened cabinets that held only basics. Cup noodles, instant coffee, bottled water. He grabbed 2 cups of noodles, filled a pot with water from the sink, set it on the hot plate. The most domestic thing he'd done in years, maybe ever. He'd had people who cooked for him, cleaned for him, managed every aspect of his life. He couldn't remember the last time he'd prepared food. Cherry watched him from the bed, her expression unreadable. "You don't know how to make instant noodles. I'll figure it out. You're a billionaire crime boss and you don't know how to boil water. I know how to boil water." The pot was heating. He checked the noodle instructions. 3 minutes. He could manage that. "This is insane." But she was almost smiling, just slightly, a crack in the devastation. "We're hiding from 2 Mafia families and you're trying to make cup noodles. We need to eat." "I need answers." She stood, crossed to him, stopped just out of arm's reach, close enough that he could see the dried tear tracks on her face, the exhaustion around her eyes, the set of her jaw that said she was done being scared and ready to be furious instead. "Why did you walk out? Why did you grab me? What exactly is your plan here?" The water started boiling. Sung-min poured it into both cups, set the timer on his phone. 3 minutes. Then he leaned against the counter and met her eyes. "I walked out because I was dying in there," he said quietly. "Not literally, but close enough. I've spent 32 years doing what I was told, being who I was supposed to be, building an empire I never wanted, and standing at that altar, about to promise the rest of my life to someone I don't know for reasons that had nothing to do with choice." He stopped. "I couldn't do it. I couldn't sign that particular death sentence." Cherry listened without interrupting, her anger transmuting into something else. Not sympathy exactly, more like recognition. "I grabbed you because they would have killed you," he continued. "My security team saw you in that hallway, saw me near you after I'd just humiliated 2 families, and they would have assumed you were involved, interrogated you, probably tortured you, definitely killed you when they realized you were just collateral damage. So I claimed you, made you my responsibility. It was impulse. And the plan? There is no plan." His phone timer went off. 3 minutes. He handed her one of the cup noodles, kept the other for himself. "I was going to disappear alone, start over somewhere they couldn't find me. I have money they don't know about, resources. I could have done it, but now..." He gestured between them. "Now I have you, and I don't leave people behind once they're mine. I'm not yours. To them, you are. That's the only thing keeping you alive right now." They stood in the tiny kitchen area, holding cup noodles, the absurdity of the situation settling over them like fog. Cherry took a bite, made a face. "These are terrible." Probably made them wrong. Definitely made them wrong. But she kept eating because hunger was hunger, and this day had been too long and too strange, and food was food even when it tasted like cardboard. Sungmin watched her, tried to figure out how he'd ended up here, in a safe house he'd never expected to use, with a woman he'd known for an hour, eating badly prepared instant noodles while every person he'd ever known plotted ways to find him. This wasn't the escape he'd planned. This was messier, more complicated, infinitely more unpredictable. But looking at Cherry, exhausted and angry and still standing, still fighting, still somehow making jokes while her world collapsed, he realized something. This was the first real thing he'd done in years, the first choice that was completely his, the first time he'd acted on instinct instead of strategy. "We'll figure it out," he said finally. "I'll pay for your sister's treatment. I'll keep you safe. And when this is over, I'll get you home." Cherry met his eyes over her cup noodles. "When will it be over?" "I don't know. That's honest, at least. I don't have much else to offer right now." She finished eating, set the empty cup on the counter, looked at the single bed, the single blanket, the complete lack of accommodation for 2 people in this space. "So what now? Do we just sleep? Pretend this is normal?" "You take the bed. I'll take the floor." "That's ridiculous." "You're like 6 feet tall. I've slept in worse places. Why are you being nice to me?" She asked it like an accusation. "You kidnapped me. You ruined my life. Why are you trying to make instant noodles and give me the bed?" Sungmin considered the question, considered all the answers he could give, tactical, practical, strategic, settled on truth. "Because I've spent my whole life being a monster, and I'm tired of it." Something in her expression softened. Just slightly. Just enough. "You're really bad at being nice. I'm aware. The noodles were inedible. I'll do better tomorrow." Tomorrow. She said it like she was testing the word, like she couldn't quite believe there would be a tomorrow, that they'd survive the night, that any of this was happening. Then she crossed to the bed, sat down heavily, started unlacing her shoes with hands that were still shaking slightly. "I don't forgive you. For the record, I don't forgive me either." "Good." She lay down without taking off her clothes, pulled the blanket over herself, turned to face the wall. "Don't murder me in my sleep." "I won't." "Promise?" "I promise." She was quiet for a long moment, then, so softly he almost didn't hear it. "Thank you for pulling me into that elevator, even though everything else is terrible. Thank you for that part." Sungmin didn't answer, just watched her breathing slow, watched exhaustion pull her under despite everything, watched this stranger he'd tied his fate to finally find escape in sleep. Then he took off his tuxedo shirt, folded it precisely, set it on the floor to use as a pillow. Lay down on cold linoleum with his back against the wall where he could watch the door. His phone had stopped vibrating hours ago, which meant they'd either given up trying to reach him or switched to finding him through other means. Tomorrow they'd need a real plan. Tomorrow he'd have to figure out how to keep them both alive while two of Seoul's most powerful crime families hunted them. Tomorrow he'd have to decide if freedom was worth the cost he was asking Cherry to pay alongside him. But tonight, in a forgotten apartment in a tired neighborhood, with a woman sleeping 10 feet away who had every right to hate him, Shin Sung-min closed his eyes and felt something he hadn't felt in years. Relief. He'd chosen. He'd acted. He'd saved someone instead of destroying them. And for the first time since he was a child, he went to sleep not knowing what tomorrow would bring. It felt like flying. Cherry woke to sunlight cutting through the grimy window and the disorienting realization that she was in a strange apartment with a crime boss sleeping on the floor. For 3 blissful seconds, she thought maybe it had been a nightmare. Then she saw Sung-min folded against the wall like origami, still in his tuxedo pants and undershirt, eyes already open and tracking her movement, and reality crashed back with nauseating force. "Morning," he said, his voice rough from sleep. "Is it?" She sat up, every muscle aching from tension and the emotional whiplash of yesterday. "Feels more like a hostage situation." "You're not a hostage." He stood in one fluid motion, no groaning or stiffness, despite spending the night on concrete floor. "Hostages are leverage. You're a complication I'm choosing to protect." "Oh, well, when you put it that way, I feel so much better." She swung her legs off the bed, still wearing yesterday's uniform, still smelling like the hotel's industrial laundry detergent, and fear sweat. "I need to go home, like actually home, back to my apartment, get my things, figure out how to contact my sister. No." The flatness of it stopped her mid-sentence. She looked at him, saw the absolute certainty in his expression, and felt rage bubble up fresh and hot. "You can't just say no. I have a life. I have responsibilities. I can't just disappear because you had a wedding day crisis." "You already disappeared." Sungmin crossed to the window, checked the street below with the automatic caution of someone who'd survived by being paranoid. "The moment you were seen fleeing with me, you became part of this. Your face is in their security footage. Your name is in hotel employment records. They know where you live. So I'll explain. I'll tell them you forced me. They won't care." He turned back to face her, and his eyes held something that looked almost like sympathy. "You think they'll believe you? You think they'll take the risk that maybe you know something, maybe you're working with me, maybe you're a loose end that needs tying up. They'll torture you for information you don't have, and when you break, and everyone breaks eventually, they'll kill you to be sure." Cherry's hands were shaking again. She pressed them flat against her thighs, tried to steady her breathing. "This isn't fair." "No, it's not. I didn't do anything wrong. I know. I hate you right now." "That's reasonable." She wanted to scream. Wanted to throw something. Wanted to wake up in her tiny studio apartment with her alarm going off for another shift. Wanted the exhausting, mundane struggle of her real life back. But the way Sung-min was looking at her, steady and certain and almost gentle, told her he wasn't lying. This was her reality now. Run or die. Stay or die. No good options. "My sister," she said finally, voice cracking. "I need to get money to my sister. The treatment is every 2 weeks. I've never missed it." If I miss it, I'll pay for it. Sungmin pulled out his phone. The screen cracked from yesterday's chaos, but still functional. Give me the details. Hospital name, doctor. Patient name. I'll wire the money today, enough for the next 6 months. 6 months? Cherry's laugh was borderline hysterical. You think this will take 6 months? I think it's better to be prepared. She stared at him. This man who'd destroyed her life yesterday and was now offering to bankroll her sister's survival like it was nothing. Why are you doing this? Because it's my fault you're in this situation. Because your sister is 10 years old and doesn't deserve to suffer for my choices. Because I can. He held out the phone. The details. Cherry took it with numb fingers, typed in the information with hands that barely cooperated. Hospital name in Lagos. Dr. Okafor. Patient name. Grace Reeves. Account number for payment. She handed it back, watched him make calls in rapid Korean, his voice sharp with authority, demanding immediate wire transfers and confirmation codes. 5 minutes later, he showed her the receipt. Payment confirmed. Enough money to cover Grace's treatments for the next 8 months, not 6, more than Cherry had earned in the last year. Done, he said simply. Something in her chest loosened. Not forgiveness, not trust, just the smallest sliver of relief that Grace would be okay, at least financially, at least for now. Thank you. It's the bare minimum. He pocketed the phone, but you still can't go home, not until this is resolved. And how long will that take? I don't know. Days. Weeks. However long it takes for them to either find us or accept that I'm gone. Cherry pressed her palms against her eyes, tried to think through the exhaustion and fear. So what? We just hide here forever? Eat terrible instant noodles and pretend we're not on every crime family's hit list? We hide until I figure out a permanent solution. Until I can either negotiate safe passage for you or make them believe you're not worth hunting. He paused. Or until I eliminate the threat entirely. Eliminate the, you mean kill people, if necessary. God. She stood, paced the tiny space, 5 steps in any direction before hitting a wall. This is insane. You're insane. I'm insane for even considering. She spun to face him. What if I just turn myself in? Go to the police. Tell them everything. Get protection. The police won't protect you from the Shin and Han families. Half of them are on payroll. The other half are too scared to intervene. His expression was grim. There is no authority that can help you now except me. I'm sorry, but that's the truth. Cherry wanted to argue, wanted to believe there was another way out, some escape route he hadn't considered. But looking at him, at the certainty in his posture, the scar on his knuckles, the weight of experience that said he knew exactly how this world operated, she couldn't find the argument. So I'm stuck with you. Until it's safe, yes. And in exchange, you keep my sister's treatment paid and keep me alive, yes. She crossed her arms, studied him with exhausted, calculating eyes. Fine. I'll stay, but not because I trust you, because I don't have a choice. That's honest, at least. And if you get me killed, I swear I'll haunt you. Fair. They stared at each other across the small space, this unlikely alliance sealed by desperation and mutual acknowledgement of terrible options. Then Cherry's stomach growled, loud and insistent, breaking the tension. Sungmin's mouth twitched. I'll find us real food. Not instant noodles. That would be a start. 3 days later, they'd settled into a routine that felt surreal in its mundane domesticity. Sungmin went out early each morning, covering his face with a baseball cap and surgical mask, bringing back groceries and newspapers. Cherry stayed inside, watching Korean dramas she didn't understand, and slowly losing her mind from cabin fever. He was teaching himself to cook using YouTube videos and sheer, stubborn determination. The results were mixed: burned rice, oversalted soup, one incident with a small kitchen fire that they'd managed to extinguish before it became a problem. But he kept trying, and Cherry found herself almost charmed by watching a crime boss frown at cooking instructions like they were tactical briefings. "You're burning the eggs," she said from her spot on the bed. "I'm aware." Sungmin jabbed at the pan with a spatula. "The heat control on this thing is inconsistent." "You're just bad at cooking." Also true. She got up, crossed to the kitchen, gently took the spatula from him. "Move! You're going to give us food poisoning." He stepped aside without argument, watched her salvage the eggs with efficient movements. She'd been cooking since she was 8, taking care of Grace when their mother worked double shifts. "Some skills you didn't lose." "Where did you learn?" he asked. "Necessity." "Where did you not learn?" "I had people who did it for me." "Must be nice." "It was lonely." He said it quietly, almost to himself. Having people do everything, never being allowed to fail at small things because you couldn't afford to fail at big things. Cherry glanced at him, saw something vulnerable in his expression that made him look younger than 32. "That's a very sad way to say you were rich." "I suppose it is." They ate the salvaged eggs in comfortable silence, the kind that came from spending days in close quarters with someone, learning their rhythms and habits. Cherry had learned that Sungmin slept light and woke at the smallest sound, that he checked his phone obsessively but rarely answered calls, that he had nightmares sometimes, small sounds escaping him in the dark that he never acknowledged in the morning. And Sungmin had learned that Cherry sang under her breath when she was nervous, that she FaceTimed Grace every evening at 7, keeping her voice bright and normal despite everything, that she was funny in ways that caught him off guard. Her dark humor cutting through tension like a blade. It should have felt wrong, this forced intimacy with a stranger, but somehow it didn't. Somehow it felt like the most honest thing either of them had experienced in years. On the 4th day, everything changed. Sungmin came back from a supply run with his jaw tight and tension radiating from every line of his body. He locked all 3 deadbolts, closed the window blinds, turned to Cherry with an expression that made her stomach drop. "We need to move. Tonight." "What happened?" Han So-ra took over the search. He was already gathering their minimal belongings, the few clothes they'd acquired, his emergency cash. "The jilted bride. She's not approaching this strategically. She's approaching it personally." Cherry felt cold. "Meaning?" "Meaning she's humiliated and furious and she's hired outside help. A foreign mercenary named Alexei Volkov, ex-Russian Special Forces. Very expensive, very effective." He handed her a jacket. "He's been tracking us through financial transactions. I got sloppy with the phone I used to pay for your sister's treatment. He traced it to this district." "How do you know?" "Because one of my people, who's still loyal, warned me. We have maybe 2 hours before he closes in." Cherry's hands went numb. "Where do we go?" "Somewhere they won't think to look. Somewhere outside Seoul." He pulled out a set of keys. "I have a car 2 blocks from here. Different vehicle, different plates. We grab it. We drive south. We find somewhere remote." "How remote?" "Motel on the coast. Cash only. No questions. We lay low until I can figure out how to end this." They moved fast, grabbing what little they had, leaving the safe house that had protected them for 4 days but was now compromised. The street outside was darkening into evening, Seoul's endless lights starting to compete with the sunset. Sung-min kept Cherry close, one hand hovering near the small of her back, not touching but ready to guide or grab if necessary. The car was a nondescript Hyundai, at least 10 years old, the kind of vehicle that disappeared into traffic. Sung-min drove with careful attention to speed limits and traffic laws, nothing to attract attention. Cherry watched the city slide past, wondered if she'd ever feel safe again. They were an hour outside Seoul, highway giving way to coastal roads, when Cherry's phone rang. She pulled it out automatically, saw Grace's name, answered before thinking, "Hey, sweetie." "Cherry?" Grace's voice was thick with tears. "Cherry, there were men here, at the hospital. They were asking about you. Dr. Okafor said they were scary. He said I should tell you to be careful. What's happening? Are you in trouble?" Ice flooded Cherry's veins. She looked at Sung-min, saw his jaw clench as he caught enough of the conversation to understand. "Grace, listen to me. I'm fine. Everything is fine. Did the men hurt anyone?" "No, they just asked questions. But Dr. Okafor looked scared, and I'm scared, and I miss you, and I don't understand what's happening." I know, baby. I'm handling it, okay? I promise I'm safe, and I'll call you tomorrow and we'll talk more, but right now I need you to trust me. Can you do that?" Grace sniffled. "Okay, I trust you." "But Cherry?" "Yeah? Come home soon, please." "I will. I love you." "Love you too." The call ended. Cherry stared at her phone, hands shaking so hard she nearly dropped it. "They went to Lagos. They questioned people at my sister's hospital. They scared a 10-year-old girl to get to me." "I'm sorry." Sungmin's voice was flat, emotionless, but his knuckles were white on the steering wheel. "I didn't think they'd go that far." "Well, they did." She turned to him, fury and fear making her voice sharp. "What kind of people threaten sick children? What kind of world do you come from where that's acceptable?" "The kind where power matters more than humanity, where showing weakness gets you killed, where a broken engagement is worth more than 100 innocent lives." He glanced at her. "I told you, I'm a monster. This is what monsters create." "You're not." She stopped. Because maybe he was. Maybe they all were. Maybe there was no daylight between Sungmin and the people hunting them, just different choices leading to the same darkness. But then she remembered him teaching himself to cook eggs, remembered him paying 8 months of medical bills without blinking, remembered the way he'd stepped between her and guns, claimed her as his to protect her, had been sleeping on floors and eating bad food and running for his life because he'd chosen freedom over power. "You're not a monster," she said quietly, "or if you are, you're trying really hard not to be." He didn't answer, just drove into the gathering dark, heading toward a coast neither of them knew, running from shadows that kept finding them no matter how fast they moved. The motel was exactly what Sungmin had promised, remote, cheap, and incurious, the kind of place where people paid cash and didn't make eye contact. He got them 1 room with 2 beds, paid the manager double to forget they existed. Inside was basic to the point of depressing: thin mattresses, stained carpet, a bathroom that had seen better decades, but it had locks on the door and no one knew they were here, and right now that was worth more than luxury. Cherry collapsed on the bed closest to the bathroom, stared at the water-stained ceiling. "How long can we keep running?" "As long as we need to." That's not an answer. "It's the only one I have." Sungmin was checking the windows, the locks, the sight lines from outside, always assessing threats, always calculating. "Get some sleep. I'll take first watch." "I'm not tired." "You will be." She wanted to argue, but exhaustion was pulling at her like quicksand. The adrenaline crash from the phone call, from the sudden move, from days of living in constant tension. Her eyes were closing before she could stop them. She woke to shouting and breaking glass. Sungmin was already moving, grabbing her arm, hauling her off the bed as the motel room door splintered inward. A man filled the doorway, huge, blonde, with cold eyes and a gun already raised. Alexei Volkov, the mercenary. Sungmin shoved Cherry toward the bathroom. "Go! Now!" "I'm not leaving. Go!" The mercenary fired. The bullet caught Sungmin in the shoulder, spinning him sideways. He crashed into the television stand but didn't go down, momentum carrying him forward into a tackle that took both men through the broken doorway and onto the motel walkway outside. Cherry stood frozen for one heartbeat, watching them fight. Watching Sungmin wounded, outweighed but absolutely ferocious, trade blows with a trained killer. Then instinct kicked in. Not the instinct to hide, the instinct to help. She ran outside, saw Sungmin land a hit that staggered Volkov, saw blood soaking through his white shirt from the shoulder wound, saw their car keys glinting on the walkway where they'd fallen from his pocket. She grabbed the keys. "Sung-min! Car!" He heard her. Disengaged from Volkov with a brutal knee strike, stumbled toward her. The mercenary raised his gun again. Cherry didn't think. She grabbed a potted plant from the walkway railing and hurled it with all her strength. It shattered against Volkov's head, buying them 3 seconds. 3 seconds was enough. They hit the car at a dead run. Cherry was in the driver's seat before she realized, keys in the ignition, engine roaring to life. Sungmin dove into the passenger side as she peeled out of the parking lot, gravel spraying, tires screaming. Behind them, Volkov was getting to his feet, blood running down his face, already reaching for his phone. "Drive!" Sungmin gasped, pressing his hand against the bullet wound. Blood welled between his fingers, dark and urgent. "I am driving!" Cherry's hands were locked on the wheel, heart hammering so hard she could hear it. "Where? Anywhere. Just away from—" He grunted in pain, slumped against the door. "Don't you dare pass out! Don't you, Sungmin!" "Not passing out just hurts." "You're shot. Of course it hurts." She took a turn too fast, corrected, kept the gas pedal down. The coastal road was empty this late, just them and the ocean and the mercenary somewhere behind them. "Where's the nearest hospital?" "No hospital. They'll check hospitals. You're bleeding out." "I've been shot before. It's not that bad." He was lying. She could hear it in his voice, see it in the way he was struggling to stay upright. "Tell me how to fix it." "First aid kit, under your seat." She reached down blindly, found it, threw it into his lap. "What else?" "Drive for 20 minutes, find somewhere we can stop safely, then you'll need to—" He paused, breathing hard. "You'll need to help me remove the bullet." "I'm not a doctor." "I'll talk you through it." "This is insane." "Yes." But she kept driving, because what else was there to do? 27 minutes later, she counted every one. She pulled off onto a dirt road that led to an empty beach, parked behind a cluster of rocks where they couldn't be seen from the road, killed the engine. Sungmin was pale, sweat beading his forehead. He'd managed to pull off his shirt, revealing the bullet wound in his shoulder, high enough to miss vital organs, low enough to be bleeding freely. He handed her a lighter from the first aid kit. "Sterilize the tweezers." "I can't do this." "Yes, you can." He met her eyes, and despite the pain, he was steady. "Certain. I trust you." Those 3 words hit harder than they should have. She took the tweezers, sterilized them, took a breath that did nothing to calm her racing heart. "Tell me exactly what to do." He did. Step by step, his voice staying level even as she dug into his flesh, even as he bit down on a belt to keep from screaming, even as she finally extracted the bullet and nearly vomited from the surreal horror of it. She stitched him up with the supplies from the kit, her hands surprisingly steady despite everything. Muscle memory from home EC classes she'd taken years ago because they were free and she'd needed the credits. When it was done, he was bandaged, and she was covered in his blood, and they were both shaking. "Thank you," he whispered. Cherry started crying. Couldn't help it. The fear and adrenaline and impossible responsibility of the last hour crashing over her all at once. "I could have killed you. If I'd done it wrong." "You didn't." He reached out with his good arm, pulled her against him, held her while she sobbed into his chest. "You saved me. Again. This is insane. All of this. I know. I want to go home. I know. But I can't leave you." He went very still. "What?" She pulled back enough to look at him, tears still streaming, but her voice steady. "I can't leave you. You're hurt because of me. Because you grabbed me at that wedding. Because you keep protecting me. I can't just run away now. Cherry, don't argue. I'm not going anywhere until this is over. We're in this together." She wiped her eyes with the back of her hand, leaving a smear of his blood across her cheek. "Partners, okay?" Sung-min looked at her like she was something impossible, something he couldn't quite believe existed. Then he nodded slowly. "Okay, partners." They stayed on that beach until dawn, taking turns sleeping in the car, both too wired and exhausted to talk about what had shifted between them. When the sun rose over the ocean, Cherry helped Sung-min move to the driver's seat. He insisted he could drive, despite the injury, and they headed back toward Seoul. "We're going back?" she asked. "We can't keep running." "Not like this." He winced as he shifted gears. "I need to end this, permanently." "How?" He didn't answer immediately, just drove, his expression set in grim determination. Then finally, "I have leverage, evidence I've been collecting for years, insurance in case I ever needed it. I was going to use it to destroy my rivals back when I thought the only way out was through everyone else's blood. But you didn't." "No. I chose to just leave instead. Thought it would be cleaner." He laughed bitterly. "I was wrong. Where is this evidence?" "In my jacket, the one I was wearing at the wedding. I grabbed it before we left the safe house." Cherry thought back, remembered him shrugging into that tuxedo jacket the morning they'd fled. "What's on it? Financial records, communications, proof that the Han family has been embezzling from joint operations, proof that my uncle has been dealing with Chinese triads behind the council's back, enough to send half the leadership to prison if it went public." That's huge. It's nuclear, which is why I kept it secret, why I was going to take it with me when I disappeared just in case. He glanced at her. "But if we're going to end this, we need to use it. Force them to choose between letting us go and risking exposure." "That's your plan? Blackmail?" "It's negotiation with consequences. It's insane. Do you have a better idea?" She didn't. And the fact that he was asking her, treating her like an actual partner instead of baggage, made her chest tight. "Okay, we do it, but we do it smart. Public place, witnesses. Something that makes it too risky for them to just kill us and take the drive. The shipping docks, where my family's operation started. Symbolic location, open enough that we can see them coming, public enough that violence would attract attention." "When?" "Tonight. I'll send word through my old lieutenant. Tell them I want to negotiate. They'll come, if only to see what I'm offering." Cherry looked at him, wounded, exhausted, still driving with one arm basically useless. "You're sure about this?" "No, but I'm sure about not running anymore." They spent the day preparing. Sung-min made copies of the USB drive, sent them to 3 different trusted contacts with instructions to release everything if they didn't hear from him within 24 hours. Cherry helped him change his bandages, watched his face go tight with pain he wouldn't acknowledge. "You should rest," she said. "I'll rest when this is over." Stubborn. Practical. At sunset, they drove to the docks. The area was industrial and forgotten. Container ships looming like metal mountains, cranes frozen mid-reach against the darkening sky. Exactly as Sung-min had described, open enough to see threats, public enough that a massacre would be noticed. They parked in the center of a wide concrete expanse. Sung-min killed the engine, checked the USB drive in his pocket one more time, looked at Cherry. Last chance to stay in the car. "We're partners," she said firmly. "I'm standing with you." He smiled then. A real smile. Small and brief, but genuine. "Thank you." They got out together. Within 10 minutes, headlights appeared. Multiple vehicles approaching from different angles, boxing them in. Classic tactical formation. At least 20 people, Cherry estimated, her heart rate climbing, armed, organized, representing both the Shin and Han families based on the different colored suits. From the largest vehicle emerged Han So-ra, the jilted bride. She walked with furious grace, heels clicking on concrete, wearing a white dress like she was attending her own funeral. Behind her came Sung-min's uncle, his mother, the Han family patriarch, the council of elders who'd decided his fate since birth. They stopped 20 feet away. So-ra spoke first, her voice cold with rage. "You dare show your face after humiliating me, after destroying everything?" "I'm here to end this," Sung-min said simply. "I don't want war. I don't want revenge. I just want to leave." "You don't get to leave." Sora's composure cracked. "You don't get to walk away from your obligations, from me." "I'm sorry." And he meant it. "You didn't deserve what I did at that altar, but I couldn't go through with a life neither of us wanted. You didn't even ask what I wanted. Would it have mattered?" She opened her mouth, closed it. Something like recognition flickered across her face. "No," she admitted finally. "It wouldn't have. This was never about us." Exactly. Sung-min shifted his weight, favoring his wounded shoulder. "So, let me propose something different. I'll give you leverage that's worth more than our marriage. Proof of embezzlement, illegal dealings, enough to eliminate your rivals and consolidate power without needing me. In exchange, you let me disappear, and you leave Cherry alone. Completely, forever." The elders exchanged glances. His uncle stepped forward. "What proof?" Sung-min pulled out the USB drive, held it up. "Everything. Financial records going back 5 years. Communications you thought were secure. Names, dates, transactions. The kind of information that prosecutors would kill for. The kind that would send most of you to prison for decades." "That's blackmail," the Han patriarch growled. "That's insurance." Sung-min's voice was steady. "I have copies. If anything happens to me, to Cherry, to anyone we care about, it all goes public. Every secret, every crime. You'll spend the rest of your lives in cells or running from authorities." "You destroy your own family?" his mother asked, voice breaking. "I'm trying to save them, from themselves, from this endless cycle." He looked at each elder in turn. "I'm offering you a way out that doesn't end in war. Take the information, use it how you want, but let us go." Silence stretched. Cherry could feel tension crackling like electricity, could see calculations running behind 24 pairs of eyes. Would they take the deal? Would they risk exposure? Would they just shoot them both and hope they were bluffing about the copies? Then So-ra laughed, sharp and bitter. "He's right. We don't need him. We need what he's offering." She turned to the elders. "Take the deal. Let him go. He's not worth dying over." More silence. Then, slowly, the Han patriarch nodded. "Agreed. You have 1 hour to disappear. After that, if we ever see you again." "You won't," Sung-min interrupted. "I'm done with this life." He tossed the USB drive to his uncle, who caught it with visible surprise. Then Sungmin reached for Cherry's hand, laced his fingers through hers, solid and warm and real. "We're leaving now," he announced. "Don't follow us. Don't look for us. Consider us dead." No one moved to stop them. They walked through the formation of armed guards, past the cars with their headlights blazing, past the leadership who'd controlled his entire existence. Cherry's hand was shaking in his, but she kept walking, head high, refusing to show fear. They reached their car, got in. Sungmin started the engine with his good hand, Cherry ready to take over if needed, and they drove away from the docks, away from the empire, away from the life that had been a prison disguised as power. No one followed them. 3 blocks away, Cherry started laughing, borderline hysterical, relief and disbelief tangled together. That actually worked. That insane plan actually worked. "I'm as surprised as you are," Sungmin admitted. He was smiling too, just slightly, the tension draining from his shoulders for the first time in days. "Where do we go now?" "I don't know. Somewhere they won't think to look. Somewhere we can start over." He glanced at her. "Together, if you want." Cherry thought about her life before, the exhaustion, the endless struggle, the loneliness of carrying everything alone. Then, she thought about the last week, the fear and chaos and impossible situations, the way Sungmin had protected her, trusted her, fought alongside her, the way he looked at her like she mattered, like she was strong, like she was a partner. "Yeah," she said softly. "Together. Partners." They drove into the night, leaving Seoul behind. Leaving the violence and the expectations and the weight of empires, heading toward a coast neither knew, toward a future they'd make up as they went. In a few weeks, they'd open a small jazz bar in a quiet coastal town. Sungmin would manage the business with the same intensity he'd once managed an empire. Cherry would run the floor with warmth that made strangers feel like family. Grace would visit in summers, healthy and laughing, and slowly, carefully, they'd build something real from the ruins of their old lives. But tonight, they were just 2 people driving through fog, holding hands across the center console, learning what freedom actually felt like. "Hey," Cherry said, as city lights faded behind them. "Yeah? Thank you for pulling me out of that hallway." Sungmin's hand tightened on hers. "Thank you for staying. For saving me at that motel. For being brave when I needed you to be. We saved each other." "Yes, we did." The fog rolled in from the ocean, thick and concealing, wrapping around their car like a blessing. And Shin Sung-min and Cherry Reeves disappeared into it together, leaving behind the wreckage of destiny and choosing something better. Each other. And the quiet, radical freedom of finally living for themselves. If you made it to the end, thank you. Stories like this take heart, time, and patience to tell. If this one stayed with you, don't leave quietly. Like the video, subscribe, and tell me in the comments. Your support is what keeps these stories alive.